Hi, and welcome to another solutions-based episode of the Observation Deck. And while the world falls further into the orchestrated chaos of tyrannical rule, and the meek sit trembling through fear of authoritarian reprisals, we need solutions. We need to push back the tide of tyranny and establish our living rights as beings of energy in whatever you view your view is of a creator, and the rights to all the resources around us. You may not have noticed amongst all the screaming negativity from the mainstream, you may not have begun to notice more and more social media outlets. I mean, those who, like me, produce content are turning our attention towards those who enslave us and beginning to study, beginning to educate and hit back in ways they never thought we would dare to, let alone begin to comprehend. Even I no longer use the word understand just for me to get it into the habit of avoiding legalese, which I'll come to later. In this episode, I will, where possible, prove my point beyond just the opinions of me and the musings of the claims I'm making. Each of my solution episodes takes us a little step further towards an end goal that, for those willing to act and put into action, will see a dramatic change to your circumstances, your family circumstances, and above all, your new mindset. In essence, it is the rebirth or birth you should have had all those years ago. As an aside from the practical steps and the results therein, it will be your mind, your view of yourself, and how you will see the new you as you look in the mirror, which is my hope these episodes will encourage the new you. I'm going to take you through certain points as if it were you trying to explain to a trapped mind what is going on. I think many of you already know about the fraud perpetrated on all of us from the moment we were born by use of birth certificates. And for those thinking this is just another one of those theories spread by people with nothing better to do, well, sit back and relax, because not only am I going to give you some cold hard facts, I'm going to prove them in real time, and you can listen to an interview I did over the phone with a registrar of 30 years plus experience who openly admits to the facts I'm going to present you with. One thing I can assure all of you: this is just the first step in getting back your personal sovereignty and a whole lot more. And by the time this series of solutions is ended, which I'm not sure if it ever will, it will be you who is educating others using the facts that they are slaves to the system, while you, hopefully, are no longer in that system. So let's get started, and by the time you get to the end of this episode, you will know how to regain your name, place legal and lawful conditions upon anyone trying to use it, and comprehend the true fraud that has been perpetrated upon all of us in a way I hope you can share easily with others. So with that being said, I'll see you on the other side. So by now, many of you, my viewers, will of course know that the birth certificate we're all given is actually just a delivery note. It's a bit like when UPS get you to sign for a delivery. Exactly that. That is to say, we have arrived, nothing more. It logs an event. It does not log us as living, breathing, living beings. But we need to comprehend, not understand or stand under this arrival, but we need to comprehend this arrival. This birthing of the vessel is nothing more than a copy of your transit into this world, and that is where the first lie begins. I'm not going to go into all the convoluted details because I suspect many of you already know. But you do need to know that not only is the certificate of birth not yours, it is a copywritten document, as is the name on it, and you cannot and will never be given the original document because you don't own it. In my case, here in the UK, it belongs to the Crown Estates. It is Crown copywritten. And so is the name upon it, well, the fictional name upon it. Now, if you think I'm making this bit up, well, here is a conversation I recorded with a 30-year experienced registrar who I had a chat with on a completely different matter, but I kind of bent the conversation round after a while to create a couple of trivia questions, nothing more. And I have removed all references to personal information and names to protect the identity of the lady I was chatting to. Take a listen to this conversation.
You know, I've been a registrar in the registration service for 20 years now.
Right, so Paul, I've got a trivia question for you on birth certificates.
Okay.
Who owns the birth certificate officially?
Well, what you've got to look at is that what's in the register is the register entry.
Right.
So everything we issue from that is a certified copy of the original entry. So any certificate will actually say that at the top.
So if it's a copy, who owns the original?
Well, the original is in the register. So that
Yeah,
is
but who?
actually...
Yeah, I know where it is, but the question is who owns it? Because
Well,
because I mean I've heard people say, oh, it belongs to the Crown. It's Crown.
Yeah, well, it does.
It's Crown.
Yeah, well, it does.
It's Crown. So birth certificates are Crown copywritten.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Everything you have, so it's obviously on, like, every birth certificate has a different serial number because it comes from government stock. It's on watermarked paper with the Crown on it.
Right.
Okay.
So so all of us, including yourself, we don't actually own our own birth certificate. We just get copies of the Crown copyrighted paperwork.
They're certified copies because the original always is in the register, and that's been the same since 1837.
1837. So here's another trivia. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just a curious person.
Oh dear. Yeah, no, that's fine.
All right. So if that's Crown copywritten, is it not fraudulent for us to use a copywritten document that we don't have permission for?
Oh, I don't know. You're way out of my league there, Robert.
Because that's a bit like me putting up on, I don't know, YouTube or whatever, a movie by Disney, and then they slap a copyright claim on me because I don't have permission to do that from the copyright holder. Did you see what I mean? So, I mean, I know it's a movie, but if I had a birth certificate...
No, I understand what you're saying, but I can't even answer that. I mean, you know, all I can say from a registration point of view is that the registers are the property of... A register always remains in the district that you're born in.
Yeah, correct.
And then that is obviously... But it is all, you know...
But it's all copyrighted to the Crown Estates, as it were.
Well, I don't know a lot about copyright, but everything that is issued is a certified copy of the entry because the original entry is the one that's penned in the register and actually signed in pen. Your mum came in to register you and we have a signature, it's dated, it's signed in the presence of the registrar.
Yeah.
That's your official registration. So.
Right. So the fact that we all get a copy means the original then belongs to the Crown itself.
Absolutely. The original is, it does belong, it is in the register.
Right, which belongs to the Crown Estates, I think it's called.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes, as I say, all
right.
If you look at all your certificates, they're all watermarked.
Yeah. But they're all copies, though. Yeah. So no citizen then can actually say, well, can I have the original of my document?
No, nobody can. No.
Gotcha.
So, there you have it, folks. Straight from the official registrar's mouth of, sorry, I said 30 years earlier, but it was about 20 odd years. So we, me, you, all of us do not own or, more importantly, have any right to the certificate, nor do we have any copyright holder's permission or license to use the name written upon it. By doing so, you are committing a fraud and infringing on the copyright holder's claim to that name. The title, which is, as we all know, is a crime. And let's be honest, folks, you wouldn't want to break the law, would you? And anyone who encourages you to use that name to identify yourself is in fact aiding and abetting in those crimes. And remember, fraud is one of the only crimes that has no statute of limitations, and you should remind the official of this, including judges. The easy way to deal with an official or a judge in this matter is to point out that what you now know to be true and ask them the question with the greatest respect. Sir, I don't have permission, nor do I wish to have that permission to use that title or name, since it is in fact just a title, just like the title to your house. In fact, it is actually the title to someone else's house or name and copyright, and therefore nothing to do with me. Well, we're speaking of you guys here. So for those of you still in doubt, I will leave the Crown's guidance that I did actually put a box up around that screen as the lady was talking on, specifically the Crown copyright rules and laws, which I placed on the screen while the lady was chatting to me, and you can read the whole document for yourself, and please pay close attention to subsection 4.1. Now, while we're on the subject of copyright and titles, think of that birth certificate as the title deeds to the house, in this case your body or the vessel, and all that sits within mind, body and soul. So let's put it this way: someone took the deeds of title to your house, your vessel, in this case your living body, slapped a fictitious title deed upon it when you were born, and to seal the deal, your parents signed the contract on your behalf without your informed consent, knowledge and comprehension, and neither did they receive any informed consent because they didn't know it was going to be Crown copywritten. So consider this: if you did the same thing to anyone's house, property or possessions, and then walked into a court and said, this is now mine because I coerced someone, lied to them and did not inform them of what they were getting into while getting someone else to sign on their behalf, do you think your defence would stand up in court? Of course not. It's just plain crazy. So now you have to ask yourself, why have these fraudsters gotten away with doing exactly that from the day of your birth, or your living, breathing birth into this world? Well, there are a multitude of reasons, one of them being you never questioned the validity of this fictional contract. 2, we had all been indoctrinated into believing this was us, when in reality it has nothing to do with us as living, breathing beings. And if you still have not got it yet, let's take a quick look at exactly what the law says upon entering into this world. I'm not going to bother going into the details of the law because that still stands, by the way, here in the UK that I'm talking about. I'm going to show you the law that still stands in the UK that lady mentioned. And to be sure to understand, all we need to do to comprehend what's going on is I'm going to just show you the very first line, because if I do that, it makes everything else below it a pile of BS. Let's have a look at this. So here we are on legislation.gov.uk, so it's their official legislative site, and I've taken you to the Births and Deaths Registration Act 1874. I think the lady I spoke to quoted 1837, but it is actually 1874. So this is the whole act, but what I want to bring your attention to, where's the Crown, as she was talking about, the seal, Births and Deaths Registration Act 1874, chapter 88. Now read this, first line: an act to amend the law relating to the registration of births and deaths in England, and to consolidate the law respecting the registration of births and deaths at sea. Did you get that, folks? At sea. So then this whole law should not actually be applicable to any births on land. But they do. They literally. So from the very first line, we've got, as you can see there, it doesn't mention the land, a hospital, at home, or anywhere else. It specifically says births and deaths at sea, because that brings you under maritime commercial rules and regulations. Now the second bit where it says, be it enacted by the Queen's most excellent Majesty and by the advice and consent of the Lords, spiritual and temporal and commons in his present Parliament assembled, and by the authority of the same as follows. Well, here's the problem with all of this BS, is that the House of Lords and Her Most Excellent Majesty and the Royal Family and the Crown are all registered corporations. They are not people. These are registered corporations. Now, I'm not going to go down through all of this act because, quite frankly, it says quite here that if you're referring to C, then this is irrelevant to you because you weren't born at sea. So this whole act is based on a false premise. I don't know what else I can do to convince you people, because that's the whole act. One thing that did catch my eye, though, that I want to share with you is this: the way that we are described. Requisition by registrar of information concerning birth from qualified informant after 42 days. So you've got 42 days from birth to register, and you've got 7 days max after that. If not, penalties will be imposed, which is in other words called malice at, well, it's duress basically from corporations. But it says here, where a birth has, from the default of the parents, it's the fault of the parents, or others persons required to give information concerning it. Now, take note of the word it. It is not referring to the living, breathing being. It is referring to the event of a birth, which is where we start to comprehend the fact that this is already being a bit dodgy. Not being duly registered. Registrar may, at any time after the end of 42 days from such birth by notice in writing, require any of the persons required by this act to give information concerning such a birth and to attend personally at the registrar's office, blah, blah, blah. It goes on to say, where are we? Unless the birth is registered before the expiration of the time specified in such requisition to comply with such requisition. Now, I want to bring your attention, because they're already using legalese. Requisition. All right? So, specified in such requisition. In other words, what does requisition mean? Well, let me show you what requisition means. Requisition, an official order laying claim to the use of property or materials. Did you get that? Property or materials. You are property. It's that simple. And you weren't born at sea. So there you go. Birth. Now, I presume that you're going to find similar wording in the United States, Australia, and everything else. And therefore, it doesn't take a legal genius to work out that if this is part of the act, you just got to stand and go, excuse me, I wasn't born at sea. So none of this applies to me. Are you getting this yet? One thing I do want to say, though, is that the steps to actually take back your sovereignty are pretty straightforward, strangely enough. That's not the problem. The problem is, how well are you going to stand your ground when you're presented with a bullying, coercive system that tries to insist it is otherwise? Because that is where people fail. Not from the letter of the law, not from the lawful standpoint that you are taking, but they crumble through lack of confidence, which is lack of knowledge, under the absolute torrent of bullying that you get from the system. When even if you point out to any judge, just say, well, look, the act applies to people, births and deaths at sea. Ergo, it doesn't apply to me because I was born in a hospital. Anyway, it's down to you how well you maintain your point of view and don't be tricked by them. Let's get back to the episode now that you've been told you were born at sea. So there you have it. Were you born at sea? I suspect most of us were certainly not. Well, not many of us anyway. So how come it is specifically written for births at sea and not on the land? Well, I guess many of you already know. In simple terms, it circumvents or circumnavigates the law of the land and subjects you, me and everyone to maritime laws, which is the law of commerce, as is all acts, laws and legislations. Remember, and they are nothing more than commercial or company policies. Let me just say that again. Acts, laws and legislations are nothing more than corporate company policies under commercial law. Think of it this way. Our birth certificate, which we know is not ours but a fiction, which, to be honest, is a polite way of saying a full-blown lie, instantly condemns you to being born under the assumption of maritime laws and therefore commercial laws, acts and legislations, which are, as I have said, nothing more than corporate policies. Look at the image where you can see the act from the link I showed you being referenced, but more than that, look at the circle with the copyright symbol there, which means Crown copyright. Now take a close look at the comments in small print below. So effectively you are being coerced, or you are by now knowledge acting in a fraudulent manner if you represent yourself as the person above. I hope you're all getting this. So from birth, under your present circumstances, we are an employee of those who registered your entrance into this world on a lie, since I suspect no sea was involved in your birth apart from a canal, and you were not lost at sea, and you never came into birth as a vessel. The name is not yours, you don't have the right to use it, and it was not signed, and in fact it was signed by another that you didn't agree to. So, as an employee of the Crown or the state, you are subject to the terms and conditions of your employer like any other business. If you break those employment terms and conditions, you are sent to HR, human resources, in this case court, and disciplined for your corporate indiscretions. Notice they never actually sack you from your employer, since that would remove you from the influence of the corporation, which effectively believes it owns you. And I bet many of you thought that the slave trade had finished. Well, welcome to the slave system of planet Earth, which never actually finished, it simply expanded. I'm sure you have all heard the pen is mightier than the sword. Well, it is. It has been used to write you and me into slavery, trick you into being something you are not, and continues to rule over you for life. Let's face it, one bullet can kill a person. A pen can enslave a nation. The police, the magistrates and higher courts are there to financially fleece you under the corporate terms and conditions. These are what we would call the HR departments of the state or the Crown, and they are really good at generating monies for your employer, in which case is the top 1%. To drive this point home even further, it is why you will never be sacked from this employer. It is because you are a valuable asset, valuable beyond your wildest dreams. And I'm not just talking about they trade us all as chattel on the international markets, which they do. And if you think I'm kidding you before I go any further, actually, let's take a look at a live example and use my birth bond certificate and see if it is in fact of any value, and any of you can actually do the same. Let's check this out. Okay, so here we are on Treasury Direct. Now, obviously, I've got a British birth certificate, but for some strange reason, mine wouldn't work on the London Stock Exchange website link that I was using, but it did work on the Wall Street one, the Treasury Direct, which is this one is for all my American viewers. And as I say, I'll leave the link in the description below, but those are the details. So let's just give you a quick rundown here. It's the value of today, obviously. Today's the June 2020. Make sure you pick, because there's a drop-down menu, so just make sure you pick EE bonds. Denomination, you've got various denominations. We'll just go to the top one. That's my birth certificate number. Now, I've got two birth certificates for the simple reason is I lost the original, got a copy, and then I found the original. So what they ended up doing was splitting the values between the two, and then the issue date. So all you need to put into the issue date, because obviously this is a copy, is the month and the full year. So I've got the 10th month and the full year, and then hit calculate. Once you've done that, it gives you the serial number of the bonds, which is my birth certificate, series EE, and then it tells me that the value of this at the moment is 33,480. I thought I was worth more than that, to be honest, folks, but hey ho. And then I'm going to put the second one in, because they did zero, and the issue date on that one was 11th, which was in November, and that was 1983. And again, I'm going to calculate. So if we add those two together, 33, 43, 53, so 56, just under 57,000. So that gives me the total of my birth certificate bonds. Now, having done that, I just wanted to do a little experiment, because I had some strange feeling, and I'm doing this for the first time in front of you people, so I've not actually done this before, but I've got my wedding certificate, my marriage certificate here, and I've got a feeling that they combined the birth certificate information between a married couple, and they might actually use the wedding certificate. Now, this might come up as not recognised. I don't know. I'm just giving this a shot as I'm talking. So because it's so young, okay, so that is the next. So is it? Oh, look, I've got some interest on that as well. So $20 interest. So my marriage certificate combining my wife's, I don't have my wife's calculation there, but that came up for the last 2 years as 5,000. So maybe I don't know what P5 is. I'm just searching while you guys didn't actually come up with anything. Right, so having done that, and you can see the total value is, let's just remove the birth certificate one, marriage certificate one, sorry. So it gives you the total value, the total interest, year to date interest is, no, I haven't earned any interest. No, I'm not interested. Now, one thing I will say at this point, just to give a balanced view for you people, is that I pressed the link on the same site, which gives you how to calculate the saving bonds, and I feel it my responsibility to inform you of what's on this site, and you can take it any way you like, but I felt it only responsible to warn you. If you think of doing this, then please make sure that you've read this section before. Birth certificate bonds. Several internet blogs and videos make false claims that a United States birth certificate is a negotiable instrument, a document that compromises payment that can be used to make purchases that will be charged to an exemption account, perhaps identified by your social security number or whatever. Request saving bonds held by the government in your name and owed to you. The truth is, birth certificates cannot be used for purchases, nor can they be used to request savings bonds purportedly held by the government. Also, the exemption account is a false term because these accounts are fictitious and do not exist in the Treasury system. It goes on to tell you about the story of the version of an older bogus draft of an exchange drawn on the Treasury scam. The common tale offered in this scam states that when the United States went off the gold standard in 1933, the federal government somehow went bankrupt. It didn't somehow go bankrupt, it did go bankrupt. It was called the Great Depression, guys, wake up. With the help of the Federal Reserve Bank, yeah, they actually bought the debt, the government became a corporation, sometimes called government franchise, yep, and converted the bodies of its citizens into capital value, supposedly by trading the birth certificate of US citizens on the open market and making each citizen a corporate asset, sometimes referred to as a straw man whose value is controlled by the government. Scams vary in methods for citizens to gain control of their alleged asset, such as filing a UCC1 financial statement, so activating a Treasury Direct account, or creating bonds by using the saving bonds calculator. These blogs and videos promise that your birth certificate bond will be able to wipe out all your debt or help you collect monies and securities. Some internet sites even offer to sell videos, webinars, and coaching on how to do this. No one has ever profited from the Treasury Department by using these tactics, but the scammers intend to profit from this story by selling their bogus wares. Well, I can tell you now, folks, I'm not selling you anything. I'm giving you information, hence the word giving. The reality, there is no monetary value to a birth certificate. Well, if there's no monetary value to a birth certificate, what's this calculating? I'd like to know what that number is doing. Anyway, let's just carry on. So the savings bond calculator is merely a tool to calculate the value of a bond based on an issue date and denomination entered. This information could be the issue date and the denomination from a real bond, or it could be just a random choice of date and denomination. The calculator only checks that the issue date and denomination entered are a valid combination. Well, I think it very coincidental that these strange numbers on my birth certificate and the dates that they were created are actually a valid pair, but that's just me. Anyway, please be advised that trying to defraud the government by claiming rights to bogus securities is a violation of federal law, and the Justice Department can and has prosecuted these crimes. Federal criminal convictions have occurred in several cases. The scam artists who post blogs and videos are trying to defraud you into buying their fake products. I am not trying to sell you anything. Do not fall victim to their schemes. Well, yeah, so that's warning us about these fake products and schemes, and I just want to remind you that these are births and deaths at sea. Kind of calling the kettle black there. So I've given you both sides of the coin here, which I felt responsible enough to do. You can calculate it for yourself. As I say, I'll leave the description in below. And if, according to this, but the birth certificate bonds, if you want to take that route, then all I would say, given what you've read here, is you do so at your own risk, because it's not going to be something, even in my later solutions-based episode, I am or ever will suggest that you do, although we will be looking at UCCs. But not just yet. Today is all about the birth certificate, history, and what you actually can do. So I think we can now all agree whether or not that information on the birth certificate / bond Treasury Direct site is correct or it's incorrect or whatever it's measuring, but we can all agree that we are traded like cattle or chattel, and that value goes up and down based upon your lifestyle choices. But as usual, the system attempts to protect itself by employing counter arguments, even to the evidence I have shown you. So we're going to, in a little while, take a look at a clip where you will now be told the exact opposite of what I just showed you in order to keep you living in fear under the thumb of corporate tyranny. Let's just have a quick look at this clip.
No account. There is no account that you can tap into that has money because you were born or issued a birth certificate or a social security number that gives you the ability to issue payments to people. There's a link below in the video description to one of the press releases out by the Atlanta Federal Reserve, and it talks about over $100 million worth of payments that have been reversed. The assumption by folks that think that they're going to be able to pay their bills is often the fact that it worked, because for a second it actually appears like it did. So here's what happens, right? You think this might work for you, and people have, otherwise we wouldn't have 100 million plus of payments being reversed from the Federal Reserve. But you send in this payment, and the people at these departments, say for your car or some other bill, the power company, whatever it is, and they open this up and it looks like a payment to them. They're not trained for this kind of thing. They're just posting payments, opening mail, doing this, doing that. They see this and they post a payment. You log into your account for your car, your monthly payment for your car loan, and you see that they accepted it and they posted it as paid, and you don't see the rest of this, or people don't post about the rest of their experience, although there has been a few people that have, and said, hey, I had to do this the 4th time, I'm redoing it, and it's not working, because there's no account.
Okay, so there you have it. But let me clarify what I believe at this moment in my own education, both the Treasury side and the guy is actually referring to. While there may or may not be some sort of account you can tap into, tapping into an account and settling a debt are two different things. It is not necessarily a case of tapping into a Treasury account to pay a bill. It is settling that bill with a denomination of your choosing. I will go into more detail about that aspect in future episodes, since what this guy is saying may well be factually correct, but misses out that the accounts could be settled in other ways without using slave tokens as part of the fractional banking system. The point I want to raise here is that if you use the slave token system to settle a slave token bill, you are adding to that problem times 10, because since they will take your money and through fractional banking increase its usage to enslave others by inflating what you paid them by times 10 and lending out the money that they simply don't have, thus increasing the overall debt to society. Are you getting this yet? But rest assured, there are other avenues we will explore that could give you the same results of settling your bills without the risk of being on the wrong side of the deal, especially when you become both the debtor and the creditor. You don't pay the debt, rather that you wipe out or settle it by conditional negotiation. But I do not want to get ahead of myself just yet, as part of that in my journey has yet to be taken, and I have no wish to make any mistakes on such important matters, because I have yet to seek advice and clarification from people who know far more than I in these matters. But rest assured, my experience and actions will be shared with you as I take them from much more knowledgeable people. So let's just recap. All right, from what we've covered so far. Number one, you do not own the copyright to your birth certificate. You are committing a fraud when using someone else's copywritten name or trading mark, in this case, your corporate name. You are and never were born at sea, therefore not subject to commercial and maritime laws or courts if you get back the copyright to your name, and we will come to that in a little while. You did not sign a contract nor get permission to use that name, so you don't have a license for it. In fact, pushing it even further, someone else, your parents, signed on your behalf without full disclosure. And let's just recap. The police, the judges, the banks, the driver's license and the utility bill companies, along with all that other commercial-based system, encourage you, bully you and coerce you into committing fraud. So they are aiding and abetting, in most cases using threats against you via fines and incarceration to use someone else's property. Think about that for a moment. What would a judge say to you and the person forcing you to commit a fraud? You'd both be thrown in prison. As Mark, the guy I interviewed on one of my previous episodes, and he will be back very soon by the way, pointed out in my interview with him, learn to sign your name and always add all rights reserved, which means you retain your law of the land rights and have no wish to indulge in any commercial contract under false pretenses, and certainly do not want to commit fraud no matter how much the official pressure that you're put under wishes you to do so. I hope some of you are getting this now. This is what Mark meant when he stated you have to stand your ground. But let's take a moment to look a little further back so you fully understand where all this came from. I'm not going to go too much into the historical context, but I think it important that this is all placed into perspective so you can complete this part of our journey together and relate this to everyone you know, because at a later date we're going to use this knowledge to push back and break the chains of our so-called employers. We are not expecting to get sacked, but my friends, we are going to quit. We're not going to get sacked. We're just going to hand in our notice. But let's first take a small look, a small part of history. And I know it might not be the very beginning, or I might miss bits and pieces out, but I'm just trying to give you an overview because there are a few significant dates, although there are many more. But all I wish to do is give you some bullet points to make it clear to you. So let's start with Pope Boniface VIII. Here's a quick history lesson. Let's check this out. So in order to understand where we're going, let's find out a little bit of where we've come from. And as I say, this is not a detailed account of history because we'd be here all day. So let's have a look at this. It's starting with an article that explains exactly what I wanted to explain to you anyway. So the Vatican owns everything. On the 18th of November 1302, Pope Boniface VIII issued the papal bull called Unum Sanctum. Aside from all that was written, the bull ends with the following statement. Furthermore, we declare, we proclaim, we define that it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman Pontiff. How arrogant can you get? The point is that since the bull declared that the Roman Pontiff has supreme control over the material world, he states that the body, meaning us, our vessels, our body, our living body, is governed by the soul, and the soul is governed by the ruler of the spiritual. Therefore, the Roman Pontiff is the governor of both soul and body. No one asked him to, by the way. It's just a bunch of him and his cronies sitting around going, how can we rule the world? So basically what it's saying is that all of the souls in the world belong to the Roman Catholic Church, RCC, and apparently, at least in theory, they do, because no one has dared challenge their claim. Well, we're going back to Marx's law of equity. Silence is acquiescence. Your birth certificate is the title of the soul that they own in their registries. They have registered you, and that is the title to your soul, like the bank holds the title to your car because you are indebted to them. I'll come to that a little bit later, indebted. In fact, your social security card is issued with you with your name in capitals, which, as we've already discussed, indicates chattel to a corporation. And it goes on to say that the Roman Catholic Church has a very long history of tyranny and oppression, dating back to the very beginning of its organisation. because of their desire to control through their crusades and inquisitions, they decided they would create the first express trust called Unum Sanctum, which was written on a papal bull and placed in their vaults. Remember, there are 66 miles of shelving in that vault, locked away underground beneath the Vatican City. I was wondering if that's 66 miles of shelving, all right, I wonder if it's, I don't know, 60 feet high, because that would give us a nice 666. Just sidetracking there. So all the souls of the world belong to the Catholic Church. I don't remember signing that contract, to be honest with you. But see, here's the thing. The Catholic Church said all of the Christian souls. All right? It said all of the Christian souls. Now, that's a very important distinction, because I'll come to that in a second. But this is why the Inquisition began, because many people were taking up to the tyranny and oppression of the Catholic Church in the early 1300s, and the RCC killed these people due to their need to control humanity. And kill they did. In the millions, it is estimated, and it wasn't pretty. Not even Stephen King could come up with some of the ways they tortured and disposed of the people who opposed them. Now, 200 years later, during the Renaissance, the Hermetica, based on ancient wisdom and teachings of Hermes, was available, which is where the Bible draws its inspiration from, along with the previous civilizations and their rituals and belief, and this knowledge was suppressed by the Roman Catholic Church for centuries. There's a surprise. Now, it goes on to talk about Constantine the Great made a donation to Pope Silver, saying St. Peter is the apostle of Jesus, whom Jesus gave this kingdom of earth to. Therefore, we're going to claim taxes. Yeah, see how this all works. We pay taxes to Rome and the Khazarian and the Venetian black nobility, elite families, based on fictional documents from Constantine issued in the year of the First Council of Nicaea and the creation of what has become modern-day Christianity. So you can see that they changed all the calendars around, as you probably know anyway. But this last bit I'm just going to cover is that we can also thank Pope Gregory for the current Gregorian calendar, which rearranged the previous Julian calendar to match the pagan holidays that the Catholic Church now claims as Christian holidays. See, they're just a bunch of thieves. Do your research, my friends. Things are not as they seem. I mean, and I quite agree with the author of this. It's all a shell game, and they can put the ball wherever they want to show up. It's like magic. Hide it under our nose and we won't even see it. A coin always has two faces, and nobody ever pays much attention to the side rim that bind the two as one. Question everything. Yeah, you see, there's my little catchphrase. Believe nothing, question everything, and stay curious. So there you go. So basically, Unum Sanctum was probably the first trust, and you can begin to understand why the Inquisition and everything else was set up. Let's get back to the episode. Now, you may start to comprehend or overstand where we are coming from. You may begin to realise that all those wars, the Inquisition, the burning of so-called witches, and the church sending out missionaries to convert anyone and everyone to Christianity, well, that was all done to increase the ownership of souls for the Roman Catholic Church, and absolutely nothing to do with the teachings of true equality and freedom of fellow beings. In fact, as with all legalese, it was completely the opposite. For instance, all those unfortunate people who were put to death because of pagan beliefs were in fact part of the old system of barter, the system where no money was changing hands, therefore no taxes could be applied, and that was not good for business. Those witches we so often hear about were actually just herbal healers, using natural universal laws and resources freely to aid other people's suffering, but again, this was in direct competition with the Roman Catholic Church and the laws emerging from commerce, so they basically had to be removed. And so it goes on. I guess you can now begin to comprehend the phrase that all wars are bankers' wars, simply because, well, they are. Now, let's move on to the medieval 9/11, as I call it. The Great Fire of London in 1666. How ironic, 666. That date should be a pivotal point in our journey, and I suspect it is by no accident of history. Think of the Great Fire of London as think of the Great Fire of London as the modern day 9/11. You'll understand why in a moment. So there we are, overlooking the burning of buildings in London. The fire wiped out everything, including all the records of ownership of businesses and names of those who lived in that grand city prior to the baker's fire. So from the smouldering ashes of London City came the template of modern slavery as we know today. So let us now move to the acts of law proposed and put into practice in the aftermath of the Great Fire. Now, in order to do that, I'm just going to zip over and have a quick look at a PDF document, and I will leave a link in the description below so you can read it in its entirety. So let's just take a quick look at this. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to leave this document, and I think this is one of the best documents any of you, my viewers, could possibly read in order to understand everything that's already gone before. Now, you can get excited about the title, Incredible Legal Remedy to Get Any Case Dismissed in Court. Now, that's not what I'm going to cover with you, but it does cover it in the document. This is 11 pages, and it makes it pretty straightforward, guys. But what I want to cover with you, as I said, is the Great Fire of London. And the Great Fire of London, which is, we start here, which is Pt4. And why should you care about it? Well, in 1666 in London, during the Black Plague, the Great Fires of London, Parliament enacted an act behind closed doors called Pt4 Act 1666. Now, I must stress at this moment in time, that wasn't the first Pt4 Act in 1666. It was an amendment to a previous act by Henry VIII, and I'll show you that bit now. So as you can see here, the Pt4 Trust is a fictional concept, just like your birth certificates. Well, obviously your birth certificates are, because it's based on this, by the way. It is a temporary testamentary trust, first created during the reign of Henry VIII of England through the Pt4 Act of 1540 and updated by Charles II, which is the one I was talking about, through the, we'll just call it the CQV Act of 1666. Now, what is this trust? Well, wherein an estate, in other words, you and your property, may be affected for the benefit of a person presumed lost and abandoned at sea, which none of us are, and therefore you, me, and everyone else were assumed dead after 7 years. So if by the age of 7 you haven't actually done all of your paperwork, which is highly unlikely, you're dead. Additional presumptions of the CQV trust by which such a trust may be formed were added in later statutes to include bankrupts, minors, incompetents, mortgages, and private companies. The original purpose of the CQV trust was to form a temporary estate for the benefit of another because of some event, state of affairs, or condition preventing them from claiming their status as a living, competent, and present before a competent authority. Okay, so in other words, you're dead on arrival according to your birth certificate and the CVQ trust. Let me go back to the beginning to just clear up the Great Fire of London bit. So we're jumping back up to the top, and it was basically created, the CQA was to subjugate the rights of men and women, meaning all men and women were declared dead, lost at sea, beyond the sea. Back then, to operating in admiralty law, the law of the sea, so you've been lost at sea. So the moment you're born, you're dead on arrival, okay? You're DOA. The state of London took custody, wasn't that kind of them, of everybody and their property into a trust. The state became the trustee husband, holding all titles to the people and property, until a living man, that would be you or woman, comes back to reclaim those titles and can also claim damages. Now, the point being is, your silence, as we've been saying, and as Mark said in his previous thing, is acquiescence, is agreement. If you don't come back and claim your title, then you're still stuck. Well, you're dead, which is why you need a representative in court, because a dead person can't represent themselves. Now, you can also, as it says here, claim damages. So you reclaim using UCC, which is basically Universal Commercial Code, and PPSA, which stands for Personal Property Securities Act. and the rule of use of capital letters used in a name. When capital letters are reused anywhere in a name, this always refers to the legal entity, fiction, company or corporation, no exceptions. So in other words, those capital letters confirm that you're dead on arrival, or you're lost at sea and you're dead. You don't exist. So the Pt4 Trust, common term in New Zealand and Australia, or strawman, common term is in the USA and Canada, is a legal fictional entity created and owned by the government whom created it. I repeat, owned by the government, which is why I mentioned about copyright to the lady I was talking to at the beginning of this episode. So legally, we are considered to be a fiction, a concept or idea expressed as a name or a symbol. That legal person has no consciousness. Now, do you have a consciousness? Well, I'm sure some of you may question that, but yes, it is a juristic person, and legis, a name, a word written on a piece of paper. And this, again, traces back, or it goes beyond, but back to 1666. London is a state. Now, each one of these states, London, the Vatican, and Washington, D.C., they're all states. The other thing that you can actually point out that these three areas all state is obviously they have their own laws, they have their own police, they have their own mayors, and they all have an obelisk. The pharaonic bloodlines, yes. London State, we've got Cleopatra's Needle. The Vatican has got the great big obelisk sitting right in the square. And Washington's got your monument. And they're all obelisks. So these are independent states. They are nothing to do with the United States of America. They are America, or something like that. Don't quote me on that, by the way. So the Crown is an unincorporated association. Why is it unincorporated? Because it's private. The Temple Bar in London. Every lawyer who's called to the bar swears allegiance to the Temple Bar. You can't get called without swearing this allegiance. The Crown already owns North America and everything in it. Your only way out is to reclaim your dead entity, or strawman as it's sometimes known, that the Crown created, and become a trustee of the Pt4 Trust, and remove yourself from the admiralty law that holds you in custody. So the point being is, and this is the point I want to make with you people, so if you think you're being represented in court, well, yeah, you're already a dead person. And the fact is, they swear allegiance and an oath to the Temple Bar, all right, which is why they get called to the bar, the Temple Bar. The point being is, they do not swear an oath or allegiance to you, who they are representing, because you're dead. And the Pt4, this is an 11-page document. I'm going to cover just another bit just to whet your appetite for future episodes, which I will be covering in detail at a later date. Check this little bit out within this document. I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I'm trying to stick to birth certificate, but I want to share this next piece with you, just so you know what's to come in future episodes. So it's these two paragraphs. I'm not going to read all of them for you because it's already highlighted in yellow here. But when the name of the trust, e.g. John Doe, that'll be you, all right, is called by the judge, aka administrator, aka trustee. So it's the judge, administrator, or the trustee. Their actual title is trustee, by the way. We can stand and ask, so when they've asked for your name, are you saying that the trust which you are now administrating is John Doe Trust? Always remember I said earlier, okay, answer a question with a question. So this establishes that we know that the name is a trust, not a live man. Remember your birth certificate, that name on your birth certificate, it's a trust. So what's the judge's first question? What's your name? Or state your name for the record. We must be very careful not to identify with the name of the trust, because doing so makes us the trustee. We are not the trustee, we are the beneficiary. Just get that into your head. What does this tell you about the judge? Well, he's a lying SOB. If we know that the judge is the trustee, then we also know that the judge is the name. but only for this particular constructive trust, because he can change his name every time someone new comes into the court. Now, think about all the times a judge have become so frustrated by a refusal to admit being the name that they issue a warrant, and then as soon as the man leaves, he's arrested. Now, this is what I want to make clear to you people, right? How idiotic is that? They must feel foolish saying John Doe, because you have not admitted it, is not in court. So I'm issuing a warrant for his arrest. And then the man whom they just admitted is not there is arrested because he is there. Can you see how ridiculous this starts to get? If, as I keep saying to you people, stand your ground. Do not get aggressive. Do not get angry. Stand in honour and respect. But do not admit. And do not take up any of their offers, even if it means, oh, could you, just take a seat. Be polite. I appreciate your concern, but no, thank you. I don't want that offer of taking a seat. Stand over there. No, I'm quite comfortable where I am, with the greatest respect. What is it you wanted to talk to me about? Which you're not naming your name, all right? Do not acquiesce to absolutely anything. Their desperation makes them insane. They must get us to admit to being that name, the name, or they pay. We must not accept their coercion, or we pay. Because the judge is the trustee, a precarious position. The best thing to say in that case is John Doe is indeed in the court, and point at the judge. It is you. As trustee, you are John Doe today, aren't you? Remember, it's a question, not a statement. During their frustration over our not admitting to being a trust name, the trustee and or executor of the trust, we ought to ask who they are. So you can, and again, politely with honour. Before we go any further, I need to know who you are. Address the clerk of the court, the trustee of the CQV trust owned by the state or province. Are you the CQV's trustee who has appointed this judge as administrator and the trustee of the constructive trust case, and then whatever your case number is? Did you also appoint the prosecutor as executor of this constructive trust? Point at the judge. So you are the trustee. Then point to the prosecutor, and you are the executor. These are questions, not statements. And so that makes me the beneficiary. Ha, you see? So now we know who is who, and as the beneficiary, that will be you, I authorize you to handle the accounting and dissolve this constructive trust. I now claim my body, so I am collapsing the QVC trust which you have charged, as there is no value in it. You have committed fraud. I rather than this accusation, you have committed fraud against all laws, I would switch that to a question and say, have you committed fraud against any laws, by continuing this line of questioning?
So hang on a second. At this point, I thought you would like to see the exact scenario that I've just mentioned there played out in a real court. So, just for your own education and entertainment, let's take a quick look at this clip.
Yes, thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Ingris, would you come forward, sir, and join
Are you
us?
saying that the trust you are administering is the John Ingris Trust?
Mr. Ingris, if you'd come up, sir, and stand beside Attorney David Allt.
John Ingris is in the court. That's you, judge as trustee. You are John Ingris today, aren't you?
Attorney David Allt.
Yes, ma'am.
Before we go any further, I need to know who you are.
I am
Clerk.
Judge Crocker, right here.
Thank you. Clerk, are you the CQV trustee who has appointed this judge as administrator and trustee of the constructive trust, case number 458-2010-CR-01203?
Mr. Attorney David Allt, your motion for competency evaluation is granted, and we will ensure that before Mr. David Allt, before Attorney Ingris is back before the court, that we're sure that he understands the workings of the court.
Clerk, did you also appoint the prosecutor as executor of this constructive trust?
Mr. Ingris?
You are the
Excuse
trustee,
me, Mr. Ingris.
and
Mr.
are you not the
Ingris.
executor?
Mr. Ingris.
I'm the beneficiary.
Well,
and I authorize you to handle the accounting and dissolve this constructive trust.
Mr. Ingres.
I now claim my body
Mr. Ingres, I will...
as I am collapsing the CQV trust,
Okay, we will take a brief
which you
recess.
have charged,
At the time we will resume with
as
the
there is no value in the trust. You have committed fraud on the court. Did you not create controversy?
And you will also notice in that little clip she completely ignored the dead man, and spoke directly to the attorney and attempts to question his competence. How dare she? She's not medically qualified. Anyway, these are the sort of things to expect when you dare to question the fake and fraudulent authority they want you to agree to. As I said, I will leave the PDF document in the link in the description below, so let's move on. So my apologies there for getting a little bit sidetracked, but I get so excited when I'm doing research and I find really good, juicy things to share with you. But I promise, be covering that with you in later episodes, and this will all be put together in one package in the, well, I'd say the final episode, but no doubt I will be doing some more solution-based series as time goes on. But as it said, so the Pt4 Trust, I'm going to use the Great Fire of London as that starting point, even though we know it's Henry VIII and beyond that even. You know, and obviously the Vatican's involved there. But the self-proclaimed authority of the time proceeded, this is in 1666, to allocate land and ownership of business to the people. But what it did this time around was yet another example of what we are now calling the Great Reset, since it established more or less the modern fiction or straw man that we see today. So back in the day, if you worked, and you know, this sort of what I'm going to explain now, it gives you an idea of where that title or that commercial name on your birth certificate came from. Because back in the day, if you worked as a goldsmith or a blacksmith or a coppersmith, or you made clothes or anything like that, then your occupation became part of your name, which is where the commercial link comes between your first name and your surname. And sir, Mr., Mrs. and that, remember, that's commercial. So your occupation became part of your name. So since there was an awful lot of smiths around at the time, goldsmiths, silversmiths, blacksmiths and all the other smiths, you can begin to see why it's a very common name today, and for good historical reasons. Like, for instance, if, as I mentioned earlier, you made clothes and your first name was John, instead of being John of London or John of son of whatever, you are now John Taylor because you made clothes. So it came about that if your name was John Taylor, description, so you've now got your name and your occupation. So your commercial income, you are now known by your first Christian name, which is John, in which the Pope basically got claim over you through their own papal bulls, and your occupation, which the Crown had just claimed, which you, or your surname, is made up of your taxable name. So as it turns out, we were all screwed over twice, because the church wanted to claim our souls and the crown wanted to claim our estates and their income. So your commercial occupation, the name on your birth certificate, was classed exactly as that, has remained all that way up until today. That is until, obviously, I think there was rumours that Pope Francis handed over the Roman Catholic Church lien or ownership back to the representative nations back in the 1980s, I think. But don't quote me on that. I just read it fleetingly somewhere and I can't remember where. Anyway, but nonetheless, you are still owned without consent and your mark lost at sea and dead. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, where is the connection with 9/11? Well, apart from the records being destroyed in 1666, we all know that there was an awful lot of other records destroyed in 9/11. But did something else many of you may not be aware of, and few may even say this is what caused the demolition of strategic locations, including Building 7, which apparently collapsed under its own weight on the same day. So for many of my American friends, you may or may not be familiar with the NASARA law, which was to be passed the day after 9/11. And for those of you who don't know, NASARA stands for the National Economic Securities and Recovery Act. And apparently this would have handed back you a debt-free system and the abolition of the IRS and so much more. But
take a look at this short clip. I will, of course, leave a link in the description below for you to watch the whole thing, because you can do your own research, as I'm sure you will. But I just thought it curious. The bit I needed to show you was at 9 minutes and 11 seconds, 9:11, into the video. I just thought it was a coincidence. But have a look at this clip, and then you might get some idea of the National Economic Securities and Recovery Act.
President Clinton was the one that signed this into law. It was actually supposed to be announced on September 11th of 2001. All right? You with me on this? At 10 a.m. The next day, on September 11, 2021, at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Alan Greenspan was scheduled to announce the U.S. Treasury bank system, debt forgiveness for all U.S. citizens, and abolishment of the IRS as the first part of the public announcement of NESARA. Now, we all know what happened instead of that.
Now I've jumped over to the PDF file of the National Economic Security and Reformations Act, or NESARA, as it's more commonly known. Now, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I just want you to understand that the Great Fire of London, 1666, wiped out all of the records. And on the date of 9/11, as the lady in question has just pointed out, the investigations, NESARA, and the announcement was going to come out that was going to make all of you American citizens debt-free, the IRS abolished, and the Federal Reserve brought to book on all of the fraudulent loans and the illegal practices that these loans were based on. And as you can see here, it was all started by farmers, by the way. The farmers' claim lawsuit was thrown out of court at each level with the records purposely destroyed. Yes, you see, we've had this burning of history and all of the documents and a lot of the information. Now, let me just explain the reason. Well, I wouldn't say the reason, but on 9/11, within the Twin Towers and Building 7, and the area of the Pentagon, there was the computer system, the data, and absolutely everything to switch the old Federal Reserve IRS / commercial system over to the new system. That is where all of the information, computerized information, was. So that was where the on switch was, within the Twin Towers, Building 7, and the Pentagon. It was all linked. So apart from the missing trillions, which is probably something to do with this as well, the NESARA Act was going to be initiated, the button pressed, within those areas, within those buildings on that later that day. So the point being is that it says here that some of the court contents in this case was sealed from public eyes, but most of it can be used today. Almost unanimously, the US Supreme Court justices ruled that the Farmers Union claims were indeed valid. Therefore, all property foreclosed by farmers' credit systems was illegal, and all those were foreclosed would have to receive damages. Now, once the farmers' foreclosure systems was deemed illegal, can you imagine the crash in the 1980s where people lost their homes? Then it would absolutely start a landslide in live people gaining their properties back again. In addition, they ruled that the US federal government and banks had defrauded the farmers and all US citizens out of vast sums of money and property. And furthermore, the court ruled the shocking truth that the IRS was in actual fact a Puerto Rico trust, that the Federal Reserve was unlawful, and that the income tax amendment was only ratified by 4 states and therefore was not a legal amendment, that the IRS code was not enacted into positive law within the Code of Federal Regulations, and how the US government illegally foreclosed on farmers' homes with the help from federal agencies. Now, positive laws are laws that have been enacted by a properly instituted and recognized branch of the government. The IRS is a trust. It's got absolutely nothing to do with the government. So how could a trust make a law for a nation? But there, my friends, is the link between 1066 and the burning of all the records and the illegal borrowings going on ever since then, basically stealing everybody's wealth made from their energy and their labor to the date of 9/11, and the on switch was in those buildings that caught fire and collapsed. Let's get back to the episode. So, as I stated, I will leave it up to you to examine that particular rabbit hole, but for me, we are going to move on in this episode towards building a better future rather than wait for someone else to become our personal saviours, because you need to become aware that it is you who are your personal saviour, since you were given free will, and that includes whether you do something about your life or not. Now, as I am sure many of you are aware, the commercial system, when trying to extract money from you, because remember, you're a fully signed up employee of the corporate system, well, you're going to continue to do that if you do nothing about it. And they also have their own language called legalese. Yes, it's a real thing. So let's take a look at the common sanitized version first, which is what the public get to hear about, thinking that they're trying to help with the BS that you're just about to see. Briefly. So here we are on the most common and confusing legal words, or legalese explained simply. Yeah, it's not explained at all. I'll explain that to you myself. The complex legal terms explained simply. Right, okay, so legal terms can be extremely confusing for lay people, yet lawyers seem to employ them at whim. Every law school student is required to learn this, so they pick it up over their years in law school, blah, blah, blah. Legalese continues to be used partly because it saves time. You see, it's saving time. It's not there to confuse us or actually mean the opposite of what they're actually saying. No, it's there to save time, people. And it can be challenging to explain a complicated legal concept fully while also keeping it brief. If you've ever watched The Simpsons, you may recall Bart Simpson yelling out force majeure, which is used to describe unforeseen circumstances to prevent someone from fulfilling a contract. You mean like, I don't know, signing a birth certificate without informed consent. Anyway, there is a lot more to the concept. I was going to say there was a lot more to the corrupt system than that, but maybe I got it right than that. And legal people know this, and all its complexity can essentially be boiled down to and condensed into Latin words. Using legalese also in some ways allows for precision, because the law students and lawyers are required to know the specific and precise meaning of each of these legal terms and things that go with it. Yeah, they're not told everything. You and I both know now that legalese is deliberately used. It's weaponized language. That's the best way I can describe it. You're at a disadvantage when you walk into a courtroom or you're filling out documents. Now let's have a look at the other side of the legalese coin.
Most people know that the word attorney is used to define a person who practices law and is trained in the art of legalese. However, they do not realize that attorneys are legalese players of the dead. To find evidence of this, we need to first study some of the definitions of the word attorney. By doing this, we will uncover important information about the hidden roles of attorneys. According to dictionary.com, the word attorney means a lawyer, attorney at law, or attorney in fact, agent. Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, defines the word attorney using these words. What do people do on a court or at a tournament? They play sports and games such as basketball, tennis, chess, or poker. Unlike basketball players or poker players, attorneys play the game called legalese and therefore are legalese players. This game of legalese is played in a courtroom. Did you notice the word court in the word courtroom? When you walk into a courtroom, you're about to play a game of legalese. This is why the judge is also known as the administrator, which is like a referee. And the agent acting for the defendant is called the attorney. Remember, The word attorney means today, most, if not all countries, still operate under feudal law, which is the law of feudalism. Because of this, when you hire an attorney, especially a bar attorney, you temporarily agree, whether you realize it or not, to transfer homage or allegiance to another lord. The lord of attorneys is the dead, which is made of corporations. The word corporation can be abbreviated as corpse, which is phonetically corpse, meaning a dead body. This is why the word corporation is legally defined as an artificial person. Keep in mind that, by definition, states are corporations. Judges and attorneys work for the state, which is a corporation. In other words, they work for a dead body. This is one of the reasons that judges wear black robes. The color black represents death. Judges are like Grim Reapers who know the art of wood magic, which is why when they walk into a courtroom, they say, "All rise." Judges say this because they are raising the dead, which are made of corporations and citizens. The corpses that judges raise from the dead are citizens because in legalese, citizens can be defined as persons. Black's Law Dictionary 5th edition defines the word person using these exact words. Judges of commercial courts are trained to presume that you are a dead citizen, also known in legalese as a person or corporation, which is why your legal name is written in all capital letters, just like the all caps name on the gravestones.
Now let me take you back a little further and using the trickster's esoteric language of legalese to explain the act of bringing a baby into this fictitious world and the players that are actually involved. And for that, I'm going to go back over to the chap that you've just listened to because I found it fascinating what he had to say, and he clearly understands this law and the etiology or etymology of words. And let's have a look at this.
The term birth certificate is made up of two words, which are birth and certificate. Phonetically, the word birth sounds like the word birth. According to thefreedictionary.com, the word birth means sufficient space for a vessel to maneuver. It can also mean a space for a vessel to dock or anchor. On a deeper level, the words birth and birth are related. They are related because they have a strong connection to vessels, also known as ships. The word vessel is defined by Cambridge.org as a large boat or ship, or a person who has a particular quality or who is used for a particular purpose. In other words, a vessel or a ship can be used to represent a human body. Because the words birth and birth are related and have a strong connection to vessels, and a vessel can be used to represent a human body, when a woman is giving birth, she is said to be delivering a baby. The base form of the word delivering is deliver. According to dictionary.com, the word deliver means to carry and to turn over letters, goods, etc. to the intended recipient or recipients, or to give into another's possession or keeping, surrender. Remember, when a woman is giving birth, she is said to be delivering a baby. Therefore, her act of delivering her baby means that she surrenders her baby to the intended recipient, which is the doctor. Remember, the word deliver means to carry and turn over letters, goods, etc. to the intended recipient or recipients, or to give into another's possession or keeping, surrender. A word that has a strong connection to deliver is delivery. Black's Law Dictionary, 6th edition, defines the word delivery using these exact words. In a hospital, rooms that are equipped for delivering babies are called delivery rooms. When a woman is giving birth in a delivery room, she is about to deliver her baby to a doctor and temporarily surrender her baby to be used as a product of a ship. This is why the doctor is also called the doc. The word dock is phonetically dock, meaning a structure built out of over water in a port along which ships can land to load and unload, or the enclosed area of water between two such structures. The doctor's task is to dock the baby after he comes out of his mother's birth canal. The term birth canal sounds almost the same, if not the same as the term birth canal. A canal is an artificial waterway that is used by a captain of a ship to berth his vessel. In other words, when a woman is giving birth, she is being guided by the doctor to dock her vessel or body so she can deliver her baby through her birth canal. Hence the term birth canal, which is phonetically birth canal. In other words, she is using her birth canal to deliver a product of a ship to a doctor, also known as a doc. After the baby is born, the doctor records the baby's personal information on the certificate of live birth and sends it to the government. The baby's personal information is used by the government to create his birth certificate. What most people do not know about a birth certificate is that it is the certificate of evidence of a birth of a ship or vessel. In other words, a birth certificate is a certificate of manifest. Like most certificates, a birth certificate has value. In a way, a birth certificate works similar to a stock certificate of a corporation. To connect the dots, your birth certificate is a certificate of evidence of a birth of a ship. This ship is not you, the living man or woman made of flesh and blood. Instead, it is your person in commerce, also known as your commercial vessel. When your person in commerce becomes a citizen, he is given a status known as citizenship, meaning a citizen of a ship. For example, United States citizens are citizens of the ship known as the United States of America Incorporated, which is a registered and chartered corporation. Having a person in commerce or a commercial vessel is not such a bad thing because it makes it easier for you to travel on the Sea of Commerce, also known as the realm of international trade. However, when you do not know how to properly use your commercial vessel, you can get lost at sea and be misidentified as a corporation, also known as an artificial person, which is a dead body. One of the ways that people improperly use their birth certificate is by using them as identifications. When people do this, in law, they convert themselves into products or franchises of a corporate ship, allowing the government to presume that they are corporations, which are dead entities. In legalese, these corporate dead entities are called persons. When you were a baby, your mother and father most likely used your birth certificate to create your identification, converting you into a franchise of a corporation. This was a big mistake. This mistake allowed the government to presume that you are a dead entity with no God-given rights, giving the government the legal right to claim you as its property. This is why the government can force you to pay taxes and charge you with fines for breaking its laws. When most people find out about the mistake thereof, they like to blame the government. However, it is not really the government's fault. The unlawful conversion of living people to dead persons would not have happened to people without the act of using their birth certificate as identifications.
So now you have a good idea of just how we are being duped into believing one thing when the total opposite is true. While we continue to accept the persona given at birth, while we sign our name, and while we keep using the tokens of perceived value, which is all they are, the commercial financial system through fractional banking will continue to increase our debt and everybody else's, thus consolidating the slave system. Now, I know some of you may be getting frustrated because the 64 million slave token question is this. How do we deal with all this? How do we claim back our birth name in all its forms and place a copyright upon it? Well, there are two sides to this coin, and I suggest you do your homework on both of them. The first is the one many tend to use when attempting to deal with the unlawful activity of a state or agent of the Crown, which is you do not have permission nor identify with the dead fictional entity listed on that event called birth. Notice I said event because that's all that bit of paper is actually doing. It's registering an event, as that chap explained to you. But it's not registering you as a live birth. That is in your hospital records and it's been converted to a bond. But of course, you and I are not made aware of that. So many use the refusal to use this title, stating that in the case of the UK, it is in fact a copywritten title of the Crown, or I don't identify it, or some such derivative thereof, and obviously use of it would force you into acting in a criminal way, and therefore you can ask anyone who thinks they can sit in judgment of you, or a police officer if they stop you, if they are knowingly aiding and abetting that fraud. Now, if you stand your ground, and only if you do, the legalese onslaught you're about to get will test your resolve, not just in a courtroom, but even in something as small as a traffic stop. You must retain your living, breathing rights. If not, you will trip up and find yourself back at square one and off to spend some time in the hotel of the state or government, enjoying the benefits and privileges of the commercial system. Just be aware of that. So the second approach to getting back your birthrights, the second approach at this point in time, I would personally lean towards, and this is not legal advice I'm giving you, it's just something that I would do if I was in that position. In fact, I've already done it, but for no other reason than I love a good debate, and I don't much care who it is or where it is, but always in honour and never in fear or anger. So what do? Well, it's to take ownership of the name, because you can claim it through a simple process which makes it your exclusive property. Since you have always used it and the Crown nor the state will contend it, it can be made yours and informs the use of such copyright infringements of legal penalties in the case of fraudulent, unlicensed use. As with any approach, the onus is on you to conduct your own research, but this is in fact an approach many have used, and so have I. So let me just explain. Both copyright and trademarks can be used without registration through the copyright and trademark bodies. You don't need them, okay? Simply declaring something is sufficient. And if you don't believe me, although I don't particularly promote the site, but factually speaking, Wikipedia have an excellent depth on both of those topics, copyright and trademark. The UK law on copyright may not be as good as other countries, but it's just one of those things. The point is that you declare yourself as the creditor and agent with full authority and author of the capitalized name or its variants thereof. So make sure you include all the commercial variants of your name. And if you're in any doubts as to what they may be, well, just check all your utility bills, your driver's license, your birth certificate, your mortgage, and there they are. To make sure that no one can claim ignorance of your new status, which could be a limited defence against your claim for infringements, publish your copyright trademark declaration in a local newspaper, making sure the distribution reasonably covers your area of operation or your locality. A declaration, oh, and by the way, everything I'm telling you now is in document form already for you in a link that I will put in below. So there you go. A declaration is linked in the description below and it is free to use. Make sure that you do personalize it and read every single line and change the details accordingly. So now you have checked and rechecked the paperwork, make sure you keep all copies of receipts for the newspaper ad, the ad itself, and any other evidence of public notice and announcement. Could be a witness, an affidavit, whatever, okay? But track this carefully and make sure you keep all copies. And please get a witness to signature what you've actually posted. I would, but anyway. Now, I know there are many ways you can claim your name and birthright, and many websites say, that say that, usually for a fee, they will do it for you. But the point here is you can do it for yourself, and the only cost to you is the ad for the public notice, and there may be a small fee to get it notarized, but I'll come to that in a second. The downside is if you get a website to do it, and they pass the paperwork on to you, in many cases the public notice is lacking in your locality, so just be aware of that. So when someone communicates with you using your copywritten name now, or in some cases lowercase but with the titles Mr., Mrs., etc., then you send them your user agreement and your documents and contracts, well, not the original obviously, the copies and anything that's been notarized. And any further, so you inform them that any further infringement goes against the terms of the user agreement, and the penalties stipulated in the agreement become due. The infringement is a copyright trademark infringement under common law and international treaty, which is actually referenced on the documentation. If you register your copyright, a registered notice can be issued with the agreement, otherwise a copyright notice can be issued. The notice makes it clear that you have copyright on your name and the variants thereof and use of it. Without consent is copyright infringement. Statements can be added to the notice to explain the terms of use. And again, make sure you personalize it. So for instance, a particular term of use could be, if you write to me again using this name, it's going to cost you $10,000. If you pass it on to a third party, it's going to cost you $50,000. You get the point. Every subsequent infringement by contracted parties racks up further penalties as set out in the Schedule of Agreement. The Schedule of Agreement is basically the charges you have placed on the use of your name. This could be in many cases for various things, such as ignoring this notice and they just continue to write to you after they receive this notice. And remember, once you send this notice, send it special delivery. Oh, well, actually, I was going to say that. So just make sure you send all correspondence to these utility places or whatever by registered post, or if you're in the UK, special delivery, and again get the evidence for that. So keep the receipt, and obviously you can take a screen capture of the signature that was at the other end, because you've obviously got the tracking number. So which if you want to use the part of that three-step process I mentioned in Mark's interview, just edit the copy of proof of posting with the new details and get the postmaster or someone else to clearly show that the contents prior to sealing the special delivery envelope to whomever you wish, to make it clear that is now your name and the name of a living, breathing man or woman. And this again will add to your growing body of evidence should these parasites either pass your debt on to someone else or continue to ignore your claims. Now, the user agreement is free to use, so make sure you place your name in all the right places and check thoroughly to make sure it is fully personalized to your requirements. Get it witnessed, and you could either affix a postage stamps to seal it next to your autograph, so you can actually sign across part of the stamp and outside of the stamp. You could, of course, make it supremely valuable by using red ink and putting your thumbprint and sign your name across the ink and just outside of it as well to show through blood you are a living being. Because this is the highest form of signature and one that cannot be ignored, but that's optional. If you really want to scare the bejeepers out of them in any attempts to use your living name, then pop down to your local courtroom or lawyer's office with an affidavit of what you did, show them what you did, the steps you took, and as it says on many websites, if you are making an affidavit, it usually must be signed in front of a solicitor, a lawyer, attorney, or a notary public figure, or other judicial officer who has administered the oath, which is the affidavit. An affidavit is just another it's just a legal term for a list of facts. So you have several options. Once that's done and it's signed, because it doesn't have to be stamped by a court, it can actually be signed by, obviously, notary public or a judicial officer. Very difficult to argue with that one after the event. So there may be a fee involved with a lawyer, but then there'd be no surprise there. But the point is, I just added that step since it would be very difficult for any court at a later date to try pulling the dead man's trick on you when you already own the paperwork that they stamped to say you're alive and well. Get what I mean? We're using the system against them. Now, you're done. Keep all the paperwork in a safe place and use it whenever you need to. So now you own the copyright to your name. Anyone else uses it, so send them the list of charges on your agreement form and see what happens. You can sit back and smile. Now, as I've seen from previous comments, many people are at different levels of experience and comprehension, but having worked in the learning and development profession for years myself, I know from my own experience that without a solid base of knowledge, without knowing a slight thing about the history that underpins your future steps will falter and you may make mistakes, which is why I've gone through this whole episode the way I have. So you need to understand that without you taking on the responsibility for deeper research, and please, not expecting it all to be handed to you on a plate by other researchers and then thinking yourself without due diligence and research on your part, you do actually run the risk of making a mistake. It isn't the responsibility of those who are trying to help with the general direction of inquiry in this matters, it's yours. This whole area is a huge subject. It is probably the biggest subject we will ever cover, and as such, it could have the biggest impact on your life going forward. The whole point of these solution episodes is to prime you and your mind before we take the next steps. It is to explain the basis of what comes next and sets you apart from many others in knowing you will be able to go forward with more confidence than you previously had. But more than this, I honestly hope it begins to make you realize it is you and only you that can make the mental and spiritual and physical shift from slave to your own savior. Because without your inner determination to believe change can take place, without your courage to overcome a lifetime of servitude, no matter what is placed before you, it will always be the case either you believe you can never win, or what changes you do make end up being a temporary reprieve from slavery. Because without personal determination, self-doubt will always pull you back into slavery. Now, this may be a series on solutions, but none of them will make any difference if you do not invest in yourself. The critical need to shift from victim to victor can only be made inside your heart, mind and soul. No one can make that change for you. The system wants you to remain cynical. It needs you to place yourself in the role of a victim in order to maintain control over you. It will be through your own education, your determination, that will make you realize you always had the keys to free yourself. But first and foremost, you have to free your mind. As a creator of my own life, as a creator even on this platform, and a creator of my own reality, I control what I can and cannot do. And I'm no different from you guys. I can assure you, those of you who I am freely sharing my personal journey with, and I have yet to complete it, I share it with you in the hope that you will be able to free yourself from a system of slavery by the same means I am now investigating.
I know life has made you, me and everybody else cynical about such things. I know a few have attempted and in some cases succeeded in fleecing people of what little money they had for the possibility of ending this nightmare existence. So just to make it perfectly clear at this point and through to the end of my journey, there is no sales pitch. There will be no charges from me. There will be no fees you will have to pay for the freedom that should have been yours from the day you were born. I honestly cannot make that any more clear. There is no catch. There are no hidden fees, and I will never impose upon you for what is truly yours. I am paying my journey forward, and I suggest when you reach the same level of overstanding comprehension, you do the same. Because you know what, folks? It's about energy, honesty and transparency. And if we all work together and stop using the methods of commerce, cease thinking in commercial terms, we may start to rise above the negativity the system wishes us to remain in. While there is and never will be a charge for my sharing of this journey, in all honesty, I do however, hope you value the time and effort I have put into this and continue to support my work in the normal ways, either by PayPal donation or become a Patreon of my channel or a small Bitcoin donation. But none of those supportive avenues are required to gain the steps I share with you. But your support does help me continue to keep this channel going and my research. Now, having said all that, in my next solution-based episode, I will take my journey further into the world of personal transition, and I hope to show you some of the results of my own actions as best I can. I will also be trying to get more information from Mark via another interview in the near future as we follow up on the law of equity and the vaccinations non-consent forms, which I personally have already sent to Downing Street and being ignored as one would expect. There is, as if you hadn't already noticed, a two-pronged path I am currently taking, which is that of Mark's law of equity route and that of creating a base of knowledge, which you've obviously, I hope, experienced in this episode, as you've seen here, in preparation in forming a family trust, complete with non-disclosure agreements, and how that will, through your true value and your life energy, be created to keep the sharks away from your hard-earned value and energy. And it will, I hope, also result in you switching from wanting to hold a worthless title to actually using resources in perpetuity. But I will explain all of that in a later episode. So the bottom line is that I hope you have found this episode educational and enlightening and in some places entertaining. And now it's time for you to start digging and making the mental switch from slave to a free soul of the world. And remember this. Once fraud has been recognized in any contract, that contract under any law is void. Think about that and stick to your guns. Stand your ground. Because here's the thing. Most of the fear you hold within is the result of lack of knowledge. Nothing more. And only you can do something about that. Anyway, if you feel my work is worth supporting in any way you can, that would be most appreciated, but it's not and never will be mandatory, since that only means it's an offer, and like any mandatory offers, it's entirely up to you. So, I expect to see you next time, and remember, question everything, believe nothing, and stay curious, and I'll see you on deck very soon.